Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to my new video. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about a special subject. Why I think all of these stories are all over the YouTube, all over the news, that Chinese economy is about to collapse is absolute bollocks, absolute BS, guys. And I'm here to explain to you why. So just to give you guys a laugh, I'm going to show you some examples of people predicting that China's economy is about to collapse. The first one, it says China expert. We should have worried about this long time ago. And guess who the China expert is? None other than Gordon Chang himself. And this guy many of you who don't know who Gordon Chang is, this guy has been predicting Chinese economy to be collapsing for 20 years. He has written 2 or 3 books about it, and every one of his prediction has failed, and apparently he's still a China expert. And this is absolutely ridiculous. It's coming from Fox News, and it's absolutely hilarious, guys. This guy is saying it's the end. China economic collapse just got worse. 1.4 million views. End of an era. This guy is saying it's 29 days it's going to collapse. 1.7 million views. I mean, people are they that really stupid? Ahead of schedule. China is done. You know, most people will lose everything. You got the Chinese economic crisis. You got all of obviously the WEON here. You got the Chinese collapse has begun. Chinese crash. You know, all you see is China collapsing, China's decline. You know, all of these clickbaits. It started, I gotta tell you guys, 85 trillion disaster, 28 trillion disaster. Make up your mind, guys. Come on. 9.2 trillion disaster. Has it just begun? 25 days. This guy's saying 25 days. And let me tell you something. He made this video 2 weeks ago. You can see it's made 2 weeks ago. And if you take out 25 days from 14 days, what have you got? You got like just over a week. So this guy is saying Chinese economy is about to collapse in just over a week. I mean, come on, guys. Who's going to believe this crap? Only idiots will follow him. And this guy's got 2.2 million subscribers. This guy's got no idea about China, and idiots will follow this guy and believe everything that he says. I mean, come on, after a week, he must be feeling really stupid after a week if China doesn't collapse. And people that follow his channel must be feeling even more stupid. Or maybe they don't feel stupid, maybe they are just stupid. Then there's more, guys. I mean, look, this is Evergrande on steroids, apparently. Bankrupt in 27 days. It just goes on. It just goes on. Are people that stupid to follow channels such as this and fall into victims of clickbait and fall into victims of all of these ridiculous stories? How stupid are people? Seriously, how stupid are people? The end. And I used to follow this channel, TLDR. He's a British guy. Why Chinese economy is collapsing. He wrote this 5 months ago. Has it collapsed? No. Absolutely ridiculous. And you got Gordon Chang here again. China economy is collapsing more now than ever. Gordon Chang, 5 years ago. Look, 5 years ago. I mean, come on, guys. Seriously. So for 3 decades now, many of the most world's insightful observers, we're talking about China experts, so-called China experts, YouTubers who think they're China experts, they're all predicting that the Chinese economy is going to collapse within 30 days, within 20 days, within 10 days, within 40 days. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. I've never heard so much BS in all my life. You have China experts such as Gordon Chang, who's made a living making crappy books about the coming collapse of China for 20 years now, and his predictions, none of them have come true, yet people like that get airtime all over the American news channels. It's absolutely ridiculous. And then you have all of these YouTubers who think they're China experts saying there's going to be a collapse of the Chinese economy, and it's just clickbait, guys, absolute clickbait. Some of these videos I've seen have got 1.7, 1.8 million views. 1.8 million views. I am so jealous. I would love to get views like that. But I would never get anything like that because I speak the truth compared to a lot of the clickbait stuff you see out there. So for the last 3 decades, you've also seen China confound expectations. China economy has turned into double-digit growth rates. China lifted over 800 million people out of poverty. 35 years ago, China's per capita income was $300, just 2% of US per capita GDP. And 800 million, or even like a billion Chinese lived under extreme poverty. Today, it boasts more US dollar billionaires than any other country, but is expected to collapse finally, starting with the property collapse. So the first week of 2022, things were looking very good for the Chinese economy. They had expected 5.5% growth for the year, so things were looking very rosy. Then, as you know, February, the war in Ukraine started, or shall I say the special military operation, and that messed up a lot of things because you had the high oil prices, the high gas prices, and it's not just the Chinese economy that's been very much struggling. It's the whole world's economy that has been struggling. Not only have the gas prices gone to an extreme level, but also the global supply chains have been thrown into chaos. So this is why not only the Chinese economy has been struggling, but also the rest of the world as well. And as you know, Britain, the Euro, and the United States have been suffering from recession, very high inflation rates. Britain's inflation rate has gone over 10%, probably around 20% by January 2023. The Euro's inflation's heading up to 10%. In America, the inflation's up to 8%, heading on to 10% as well. So things are very, very not good for the rest of the world. The Chinese inflation rate is still under 3%. I believe it's 2.7% at the moment. So there's still a lot of room, a lot of leeway to go, according to the Chinese economy. So the first thing you need to understand that the Chinese system is different from the West, different from the Western economy, different from the Western financial system. Firstly, I want to explain that the long-standing view, or the long-standing Western view of the Chinese system, very much differs what works everywhere else. China pushes towards free market capitalization, a degree of political control many observers consider incompatible with sustained growth. The mix might have worked, so the reasoning goes, for the last however many decades, but as a matter of logic, they believe that the system cannot continue anymore. Observers advance this hypothesis on a sliding scale, beginning at one extreme with the view that liberal democracy is the only solution to the fundamental problems of human history. Contrast Chinese leaders' push for control with how these markets need to be self-regulating and free. With the world at large, economies obtain certain social outcomes through different combinations of states and markets. So you can see in the West, no advanced economy practices the extreme free market fundamentalism that allows financial markets to be not only self-regulating and free, and if any had done so before, exactly none of them did after 2008 global financial crisis. This is a hypothesis, in fact. China's own pathway to development differs from everywhere else. I want to also take a step back and look at some history of China's economic and financial history. And in the most recent time, I believe it was the first week of 2016. 2015, 2016 was the last time China's economy had struggled. So after the financial market volatility of summer 2015, Chinese regulators had announced circuit breakers to be installed in the new year. When the market shifts more than 5%, trading halts for 15 minutes, more than 7% suspends trading for the day. Awkward for China's regulators was that on the first day of operation, their circuit breakers had shut down the market by 1 p.m. Then only 3 days later, on January 7th, the market again was forced to close. This time 29 minutes after the morning opening. Two other developments fueled some unease. On December 2015, Chinese foreign exchange reserves fell a record 108 billion. Ending a year that saw the first ever annual decline, reserves were down 17% since the June 2014 peak to 3.33 trillion. China was burning through lots of foreign exchange reserves to defend its currency. Even so, the renminbi fell 6% against the US dollar over 2015, showing markets' lack of confidence in China's economic future. The other large concern on observers' minds was China's slowing real economy. A long way now from showing double-digit growth, China's GDP was widely expected to turn perhaps only 6.9% expansion over 2015. While this growth rate would have been envy of any other large economy, it would be also China's lowest for 25 years. I want to recall that in 2005, China's GDP amounted to 2.3 trillion, a 12% growth rate then. China generated an increase in economic value of 274 billion. In 2015, however, China's GDP came to 11.3 trillion. 7% growth on that economy increases value by 790 billion, almost 3 times that a decade ago. So at the end of 2015, China's manufacturing PMI stood at 54.4, a 16-month high. Perhaps the low manufacturing PMI correctly signals a dramatic slowdown, or it might simply suggest to show that China is navigating its structural transition. But numbers only form part of the story here. The world flip-flops constantly because of outside influences like the Ukrainian war, COVID, and other issues, geopolitics issues. So in 2015 August, China followed advice from the IMF and allowed each morning's exchange rate fix to hew the previous evening's close. China's government has learnt a lot from those days, and especially from the advanced economies, that businesses should raise more finances through equity markets, and those markets can offer attractive options to consumers. But China's financial markets still remain woefully underdeveloped. You have to understand, China is still a developing country. It's not yet at the developed stage yet, and its markets are not at the advanced economy stage. So China has indeed learnt from 2015, and 2015 is not really a long time. It was only 7 years ago. And indeed, a lot of recent events have happened in China. We're talking about COVID, we're talking about these droughts and heat waves, we're talking about what's happening in Ukraine, we're talking about this decouple thing that's going on with the United States. We're also talking about the housing bubble crash. So there's a lot of major factors which people assume that China can't handle it and they're going to crash anytime soon. But they have been saying that over 10-20 years. So I'm going to go through the rest of the presentation, and I'm going to show you in numbers and figures how the Chinese economy is not ready to collapse and is not collapsing anytime soon. So all of these people that are clickbaiting that Chinese economy is ready to collapse, it's just a load of BS, guys. And all of you intelligent people out there who are listening to my channel, good on you. Compared to the 2 million that listen to the clickbait and get really happy, frothing at the mouth, thinking, yeah, Chinese economy is about to collapse. Yeah, let's celebrate. It's wishful thinking, guys, wishful thinking. The truth is in this presentation here. So let's start with the currency. The Chinese yuan is falling against the dollar, and it has been falling for a number of months. But this is for many factors. The US dollar has actually been rising against all other currencies in the world. This is because the United States has the world reserve currency as the US dollar. And whenever there's a problem with the world, whenever there's issues with recession, whenever there's issues with inflation, what a lot of countries tend to do is they tend to buy up a lot of US dollars. And this is because US dollar is the world reserve currency, and is considered safe and stable. So a lot of advanced economies and lots of developing economies as well, what they do during hard times is to buy up the US dollar. And a lot of countries around the world have been buying up the US dollar. This means that the US dollar is getting stronger. Even though the US economy is right now on recession, the inflation's going out of control, the cost of living in the US is really, really bad. However, the US dollar is doing really, really well. This is good news and bad news for many reasons. Good news for China is because Chinese yuan is falling in value, their exports are going to be cheaper. So China is an exporting nation. They have a surplus of 101 billion per month. And that is an export surplus, which means Chinese goods will be sold cheaper to the rest of the world. The bad news is the cost of energy. And if the world reserve currency is done in US dollars, the cost of energy will be higher because the Chinese yuan is lower and the US dollar is higher. So this means the cost of energy is going to be higher. So countries like China, India even, are going to be suffering a lot more because they are huge energy and oil and gas importers from the rest of the world. However, due to geopolitics, China is buying a lot of Russian gas, a lot of Russian oil, and they are buying that in their own currencies. So they are buying it in ruble, they are buying it in yuan. So that means that they are not reliant on the US dollar, on the world reserve currency to buy energy from other countries. Same thing happening in India. They are buying a lot of Russian gas and a lot of Russian oil as well. So the bad news for the US dollar is because the US dollar is rising in price, it's actually bad news for US exports, which means US exports are going to be more expensive and other countries will have to buy goods more expensive from the US compared to buying it from China, for example. So you'll see a lot of countries start buying goods away from United States. Also, United States is running a trade deficit. Their trade deficit is around 89 billion right now. And we're talking about over $1 trillion per year. This is bad news for the US because if your currency is very, very strong and you're running a trade deficit, your exports will go down and your imports will go up, which means your trade deficit is going to get even higher. And that's how it works, guys. That's the economy. You're welcome to check the figures if you want. The other thing I was going to talk about is the Chinese yuan against the euro. As you can see, is growing. You can compare it with the British pound. It's also growing. So the only currency is going down against seems to be the US dollar, and as you know, euro and British pound are pretty strong currencies. So the Chinese yuan is actually not doing that badly. It's only the US dollar, the reserve currency, which is doing very well at the moment. And that's not a good thing, like I've explained to you. Number 3, foreign direct investment. So foreign direct investment is basically an indicator of how much confidence a country has for foreign investment, for other countries to pour money in. So all of this talk about USA decoupling from the Chinese market, it's a load of BS, guys. It's not happening. There's more and more US companies investing in China, and there's a lot of European and other companies from all over the world still investing in China, and this foreign direct investment is increasing year on year. And it says here it has expanded 17.3% in the first 7 months of the year. In US dollar terms, the inflow went up by 21.5% year on year to 123.92 billion. So you can see that's a lot of money of foreign direct investment coming into China, and this is growing year on year. And if there was no confidence whatsoever in the Chinese market, or if you think that the Chinese market is about to collapse, why would anyone, invest money in a country that's about to collapse? It doesn't make sense. So All of these people that are saying the Chinese economy is about to collapse, why would anyone invest money in that market then? Right? Just think about it. If the Chinese economy was about to collapse, then surely it makes sense for companies to pull money out rather than push money in. And you can see here, during this period, investment from Republic of Korea, the United States, Japan and Germany climbed by 44.5%, 36.3%, 26.9% and 23.5% respectively. So these are huge numbers, and all of these talk about the Chinese economy is going to collapse. There's all this decoupling going on from the US and other countries. No, the numbers doesn't tell you that, guys. Numbers doesn't. Number 4, GDP. So the GDP forecast has been lowered by Goldman Sachs and by Nomura. So Nomura has cut China's GDP growth to 2.8% from 3.3%, and Goldman Sachs had lowered it to 3%. So which is still not bad. You know, you got to compare China's GDP growth compared to the rest of the world. And as you know, the rest of the world is having some severe recession, and looks like they're going to be under recession for a long time. The Eurozone is under recession. The US economy is in recession, and definitely the British economy is in recession. Previously, recession meant that if your economy has lower growth for 2 successive quarters, then your economy is under recession. However, the definition of recession has changed, and they've changed it very recently, but previously it did mean that. A lot of people seem to think that the Chinese economy is under recession as well. And again, under the previous definition where you have 2 quarters of negative growth, China has not had that. So why are they moving the goalposts this late in the day, right? You know, China is not under recession. There's a lot of people I've seen online, a lot of economists saying China is under recession. Definitely not under recession, not under the previous definition, and definitely not under the current definition either. So you might say to yourself, haha, Chinese economy is growing by 3%, is really low. But you got to compare it with the rest of the world, guys. How much do you think the US economy is going to grow this year? You know, I think it'd be lucky for them to grow even 0.1%. You know, how much do you think the Eurozone is going to grow this year? How much do you think the British economy is going to grow this year? Definitely not going to be 1%, definitely not going to be 2%, not even 3%. So this is an economic race between China and the rest of the Western economic powers. So as long as China has longer and bigger growth than the US and bigger than the euro, then they're happy. You know, 3% is still a lot better than what the American economy is forecasted to grow. You know, and 3% is a lot. You know, if you count all of these outside factors, we're talking about the obviously the war in Ukraine or special military operation that's happening there. We're talking about the current inflation that's happening around the world. We're talking about the gas prices, the oil prices. We're talking about the supply chain issues. We're talking about the decoupling that's going on between the US and China. So there's many outside factors happening right now. And 3% is pretty good number considering all of these issues that the world is having. And recently, obviously, you've got the heat waves happening. Lots of climate change related issues. There's too many to name, too many outside factors. So definitely 3% is pretty good considering what's happening around the world. Number 5, PMI. So Purchasing Managers Index is a very good indication of how a country's manufacturing is doing. So the true definition of this is an index that measures the month-over-month change in economic activity within the manufacturing sector. So China's PMI has starting to increase So it had reduced last couple of months because of COVID, because of all these other issues that China has been facing. But now COVID is behind them, apart from one or two lockdowns still in a few cities, minor lockdowns, not as major as the one they had in Shanghai. However, there are still a few COVID cases coming up here and there, but it's no way as bad as it was during the times of a couple of months ago. So things are starting to get back to normal, and I love how these Western papers, not only Reuters here, but also the Financial Times, they love to paint the picture that Chinese economy is shrinking, the manufacturing is shrinking. However, if you look at the actual figures, that is not the case. And you can see here, China's factory activity declines as COVID hits output. However, it's not declining. If you look at the actual figures, and this is from their own figures, by the way, the official Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index rose to 49.4%. So it hasn't declined, it's actually rose 49.4% in August from 49% in July. So can you see how they try and, mix the words in the headline? Factory activity declines. And same in the Financial Times. China manufacturing shrinks again. It's not shrunk again, it's actually rose. So you can see how these Western papers these journalists are full of Chinese haters and anti-Chinese. They can't seem to write anything good news about China. So they love to kind of, clickbait people with false headlines. But if you read the actual content, you will see that PMI has actually rose to 49.4% in August compared to 49 in July. And as you know, July China had a lot of issues, and now things are starting to get back to normal. COVID is behind them, the heat waves are behind them, and a lot of the issues that China had over the last few months is all behind them, and now they're starting to open up again. So you will see this PMI really shoot upwards over the next few months. So this is China's PMI. And you can see from November last year all the way till February this year, China has been running at full guns blazing. Suddenly the war in Ukraine happened, and also other factors such as lockdowns. And around April time, there was a huge lockdown in Shanghai. The whole of Shanghai was locked down. There was other major cities like Shenzhen was locked down as well. So there were some huge issues China was facing along that time. So since then, China had recovered in June, and last month they obviously had a lot of issues with heat waves and some blackouts throughout China. Plus there was some other lockdowns as well happening around China. So there was a lot of issues still. They haven't gone back to full capacity yet. But this month you can see it's an upward trajectory. Things are looking back to normal. It's obviously not over 5% yet, but it is getting there. And I've said before, they've seen the back of COVID. They have also seen the back of the heat waves and many other issues. So things could go back to normal in the next few months. And as you can see, it's going on an upwards trajectory right now. And by next month, by September, you will see things going back to normal. Number 6, trade. As you can see from these figures, the trade surplus for China is looking very, very good. And just to give you some numbers, you can see here, July's strong export performance sent China's trade surplus to a record 101 billion for the month. This is the first time it has surpassed the 100 billion threshold. By comparison, the trade surplus in July 2021 was just 56.6 billion. So imagine this, China has a trade surplus of $101 billion per month. And if you work that out on a 12-month, you're talking about 1.2 trillion here. And so China has extra 1.2 trillion as a surplus in 1 year. And that's a lot of money. You can do a lot with that money. And compare that to the US. The US goods trade deficit we're talking about deficit here, and this is not surplus, narrowed to USD 89.1 billion in July 2022. So if you work that out within the 12 months, and if you average that within 12 months, we're talking about over 1 trillion deficit in a year. I averaged that because you can see from the last month, it was 98.6 billion the previous month. So you can see it goes up and down, and by average, it works out about trillion the US will have trade deficit. Compare that with India. India's trade deficit has rose to 88%, and you can see here, India's trade deficit rose to 87.5% to 192 billion in 2021-2022 against 102.63 billion the previous year. So India's trade deficit is almost doubling this year compared to last year. And that can't be good, because India is a huge importer of gas and oil. And if they buy a lot of gas and oil and buy it with US dollar reserve currency, so then that means India's will have to pay more, because the US dollar has gone up, India's rupee has gone down, so they will have to pay more for these gas purchases and oil purchases. And this is why India's buying a lot from Russia and buying a lot with their own currency, which will help them. So let's talk about imports, exports, shall we? Compare what's happening in China with what's happening in Turkey, what's happening in Sri Lanka, for example. And as you know, Sri Lanka is not an export surplus country, it's a trade deficit country, and so is Turkey. They import more than they export. And that's the problem. When you import more than you export, then your currency is at risk, because you have to rely on foreign reserves, you have to rely on the dollar, you have to buy gas and oil using US dollar reserve currency. So that puts you at risk. And when you're at a trade deficit as opposed to trade surplus, a lot of suppliers, a lot of countries will stop trading with you until they get paid. And one thing leads to another, and you stop paying because you don't have the money, and a lot of goods stop being delivered, and that devalues your currency even more. So that's a problem with Sri Lanka, that's a problem with Turkey and many other countries around the world which are having economic issues. But when your country has a trade surplus of over 100 billion a month, you have a lot of tools to get away from trouble. So if your economy is not doing well, or if your housing bubble crashes, or something major happens within your economy, you have the means, you have the tools, you have the money to get yourself out of trouble. And this is why China is not going to collapse anytime soon, because they have the money to get themselves out of trouble, right? If China was losing money, if China was not making any money, then fine, yeah, I can understand that. But China's making a lot of money, guys. They got 104 billion people living in China. And imagine the money that gets generated from those people. Every time somebody goes to buy shopping in a supermarket, anytime that someone uses public transport, anytime somebody goes and uses a high-speed rail in China, anytime somebody makes any sort of business transaction, that's money moving around China, and that contributes to GDP growth. And when a person buys something in any country, whether you go to a restaurant, pay for a meal, whether you buy a pack of cigarettes, whatever you buy, you have to pay tax on it. And these are tax which goes to the government, and obviously the government makes money. When you have 1.4 billion people buying stuff around China, imagine the tax money that the government will make. So the Chinese government is making a lot of money, guys. Do not worry about money. I mean, they have money to burn at the moment. And the Chinese are very wise with money. They say that each Chinese citizen, they save their money. They're very good at saving. They're very good at investments. What they do is that they buy properties. They look at the long term. Chinese people are very good at saving. So even though their consumer spending is very low at the moment, and this is because, there's been a lot of lockdowns all over China. China is still closed, by the way. It hasn't really opened up fully yet. And there's still a lot of people who can't travel between cities and many other issues as well. So the Chinese people are very much saving their money. And you will see once, the next few months, once they're completely over this COVID and once they're completely over all of these internal issues that they're having with heat waves and other things, you will see the Chinese people start spending again. So as a summary, I just wanted to explain that having a huge trade surplus for a country gives you huge amounts of tools, gives you huge amounts of leeway. If there's any problems with the economy, any problems with the country in itself, the Chinese have many options to get themselves out of trouble, spend themselves out of trouble, and they have the tools to do that. So number 7, markets and COVID. So I'll tell you guys, I'm not here to sugarcoat anything. I'm not being paid by the Chinese government. I'm not here to spread propaganda. I will tell you as it is. And right now, from this article, you can see that Chinese stocks are falling. There's still COVID lockdowns happening in places around China as well. So they're not completely out the woods yet. There's still issues in and around China. There's a lot of issues. So I'm not here to sugarcoat anything. However, I can tell you that things are not as bad as they were a few months ago when they had to completely shut down Shanghai. And Shanghai, as you know, is their main city, a huge manufacturing hub there. Loads of factories had to be shut down. They had to shut down Beijing as well. They had to shut down Shenzhen. So 3 major cities they had to shut down a few months ago. So it's no way as bad as that. No way. So only positive thing I can probably say is all of that stuff is behind them a few months ago. There are a few COVID shutdowns here and there, but very few and far between. And they will get over it. This Omicron virus is not major virus. It's not that dangerous as it was when the first virus came out last year, when things were really bad all over the world. So they will get over it, and eventually over the next few months things will get back to normal, and that's a guarantee. So China has not even opened up yet. So you have to understand most of the world has opened up. They're letting in people travel to different countries. They don't need a COVID test. People don't need to go on lockdown as soon as they arrive to a country. They don't need to go through all of these tests. So the rest of the world is pretty much opened up as normal. Only China is still not opened up. So all I can say is, as soon as China opens up, you can see a huge amount of people going into China. You will see a huge amount of businesses going into China, and China's economy will improve even more. Because right now, China's still closed. They're not letting in visitors. I tried to apply for a visa myself and I was rejected. So they're still, closed. They will still not allow people right now until things get back to normal. But when China does open up, you will see a huge influx of foreign direct investments. You will see huge influx of foreign visitors going in, spending money, and you will see a lot of businesses moving into China, and China's economy will go to the next level. Right now, things are at the bottom, but you will see over the next few months they will start improving. They will start opening up slowly, and I suspect within this year, between August and the new year, they will open up fully, and I don't know exactly what date, but it will be this year at some point. And when that happens, you will see Chinese economy just burst into life, and I can guarantee that. Number 8, demographics. So there's a lot of reports, a lot of YouTubers who are very misinformed about what's happening around China. They think that because of the one China policy, China will suffer in terms of demographics. Their population growth is going to go down. They're going to suffer like Japan, and their economy is going to stagnate and not grow, exactly how Japan has not grown over the last 10 years. They are very misinformed. They are very, very wrong. First of all, you can see from this report, China's netizen population reaches 1 billion, which means 1 billion Chinese people now use mobile phones. And this tells you a couple of things. Number one, 1 billion Chinese people are away from extreme poverty, which means 1 billion people are moving on to the middle class. Basically, if you own a mobile phone, usually means you got a job, you got money, you can buy a mobile phone, and you can do things. So if you're suffering from extreme poverty, obviously you can't afford a mobile phone, you can't do stuff, you can't pay for contracts because you're under extreme poverty. So this tells you that 400 million people are still under poverty of some sort, but 1 billion Chinese are now gone out of poverty and now moving into the middle class, because you can own a mobile phone now and you can pretty much move on with the rest of your life. This is really, really good. Secondly, having 1 billion people in China, obviously you will think that, you can't give 1 billion people jobs, there's going to be many people unemployed. Yeah, true. Okay, there might be people that are unemployed. But look at China's manufacturing sector. Most of it is, AI. Most of it's manufacturing with robots and things like that. Chinese economy is now moving away from, labor intensified economy into high manufacturing economy. And when you move into the high manufacturing economy, this is very normal trend that there's not going to be many jobs, because most of it will go into high manufacturing, which means most of it will be taken up by AI or robots. And this means that demographics will not matter. So it doesn't matter if Chinese, population goes down over the next few years, because they are moving away from hard labor. They are moving away from labor-intensified jobs where there's not much profit. Most of the profit gets taken up by Apple or other major companies. But China itself, they don't really make much profit from low-intensity, low-labor jobs. The high manufacturing jobs is where the money is. And obviously, there's going to be less and less jobs in high manufacturing jobs. And this is why it doesn't really matter about the demographics, because if your future growth is based on technology, AI, robotics, most of the work is going to be done by robots, most of the work is going to be done by AI. You're not going to need the people. So having a demographics really doesn't really matter for China. Really, it doesn't matter if their population increasing or decreasing. Their main problem is finding people jobs, and having 1 billion people, does give you a lot of options. Mainly, there might not be many jobs, but a lot of people can start, opening up their own businesses. You got 1 billion people there, and if you're a business and you got so much customer base, you can open up any business and you will make money somehow. There's stories about people in Xinjiang opening up, YouTube channels and selling Xinjiang products and many other products online. And people are doing that all over China because you have such a major market. You have 1 billion people. You can do a lot with that. And having jobs, is not the end of the world. Like I said, you can open up your own business. You can do many things, because when you have a huge, amount of people, you have really, really good infrastructure. There's everything in your path to succeed. And these YouTube channels that say demographics is going to cause a huge issue to China, their lower population means they're going to be lower GDP growth. That's not true at all. It's not the way China is moving, and China is realizing that, and they're already making preparations for that already. The future, we're looking at a lot of AI stuff happening in the future. There's going to be less and less need for manual labor in the future. So, it's going to be AI, it's going to be robotics. Demographics is not going to make any issues whatsoever. It all depends on a country's high value growth, high technology, and exports, imports, and plus local circulation as well, or dual circulation as the Chinese call it. And many YouTubers seem to compare China with Japan. China is not Japan. You know, look at Japan compared to China. Japan has got, you know, a very, very small island compared to China. There's not much they can do with Japan right now. I mean, they are literally fully occupied. You know, Tokyo and all of these other major cities have grown as much as they can grow. They just don't have any space left. They don't have any space for renewables. They don't have any space for a growing population. They just don't have it. You know, Japan is very different from China. China still is growing. You know, there's still a lot of space that China can grow into. There's a lot of space for renewables, solar energy, wind power. You know, there's so much more potential that China can do with their country compared to Japan. And in terms of middle income, working class people, you know, you're talking about 1 billion people which are working class or in the middle class, compared to America, which is around 350 million. So it's still a huge number compared to the United States. And it's going to stay like that for the next foreseeable future as well. And when China becomes the number one economy, which it will within the next 10 years, or within the next 8 years, if things go the way they're going with the American GDP growth and compared to the Chinese GDP growth, they will get there eventually. And when they do get there, you will see a huge amount of influx of foreign people wanting to go to China. And this is exactly what's happened to America. They've had a huge amount of foreigners going into America when America was the most powerful. And the same thing will happen to China, and their population will grow even more. So China has got very, very great potential when it comes to demographics. Number 9, China's housing bubble. So I'm not going to sugarcoat things again, and I will be honest with you and say that there is a major problem with the Chinese housing market, although things are not looking good. However, President Xi Jinping had said that Chinese homes are for living, not for speculation. And all of this is actually man-made. All of this crisis that the West is talking about is all been man-made. And it's been man-made because the Chinese leadership knows that there is a huge Chinese housing market bubble, and it's going to burst eventually. So what they've done, they have manually burst it before it got too big. So this is why they created the 3 red lines last year. And the 3 red lines, you know, when they created that, they put it into they implemented it. And one of the first property developers to, you know, completely fail that 3 red lines was Evergrande, and followed by a few other property developers as well. So the Chinese probably underestimated the amount of issues this would cause. And obviously you got Evergrande, which is China's one of the biggest developers, and they've got assets worth 300 billion. So we're talking about a huge number here, huge amounts. And plus, you know, one thing leads to another. The property industry has many suppliers, so many suppliers were being affected as well. Workers, a lot of people got laid off. So it has caused a lot of issues. However, this had to happen sooner or later. And what the Chinese government has done with the 3 red lines, they made sure this happens sooner rather than later. So if they went and not did anything, this could have gone unchecked for years, and the bubble would have been much, much bigger, you know, 5 years down the line or 10 years down the line. So this bubble eventually had to burst sooner or later. So the Chinese government decided to burst it now. And yeah, there is trouble, there is issues, but I believe they will work through it. You have to understand, properties are like assets. So you will always make money from properties. So a lot of these property developers who are going bust, the Chinese government are buying these properties off them or taking it off them. And they are finishing off these properties and they're giving it to the people. And because the Chinese government do not want huge riots in the streets and people losing properties and stuff like that. They do not want that. So they will make sure these properties get built, they get finished, and they are given to whoever's paid for them. So they will do that. They have the money, they have the facilities, plus they will learn from this experience as well. And they will never ever let this bubble get this big ever again. Unlike the Chinese government have said, like Xi Jinping has said, houses are made for living, not for speculation. So the Chinese economy has been growing over double digits for the past 20-30 years, but most of it has been growing because of property. So the GDP value was pretty fake because it was based on property values, and property values were shooting up in China. A lot of Chinese were getting rich out of it. They were buying properties, selling them, making a huge profit. A lot of millionaires were being built in China because of properties. And properties is what the Chinese are mainly using to put all of their money in. However, things have changed last year. Last year, the Chinese government have realized that they cannot use property to increase their GDP growth anymore. They have to grow it with real GDP growth, which means they have to look at their manufacturing. They've got to look at real high technology GDP growth, things like selling EVs around the world, selling renewable technology, renewable solar panels, wind turbines, things like that. That is real GDP growth. When you have an industry, when you have a manufacturing industry within your country and you sell it to the rest of the world, that is real GDP growth, not by using property. So the property bubble has burst in China, but they have done it. It's a man-made property bubble burst. It's like grabbing a pin and bursting the bubble yourself, and that's what they've done. They've realized they cannot indefinitely grow their GDP using property values, because property values is not for speculation, it's for living in, and that's what they want. They want people to live in them, not for speculation. So I believe they will get over this hurdle, and it is a hurdle. They have the means, they have the necessary means, and like I said, properties are assets. End of the day, when these properties finish building, when you build these properties, they get handed over to the people. These are still assets. These are not speculative bonds and shares and stocks. Like if you look at how Lehman Brothers crashed, it was because they used to give out lots of bad loans to people. But bad loans are not assets. Assets are properties. This is a completely different thing. So people who are saying that Evergrande will bring down China, or this property crash will bring down China, it really isn't. Yeah, it is a hurdle. I'll admit that, but it really is not going to bring down China. I believe China is doing everything they can to get off this hurdle, and once they get off this hurdle and things are back to normal again, things will be much, much better for the Chinese economy. I can't say the same for the Western economies though, because the property bubble for the Western economies is still growing. I know for a fact in the UK, people just can't afford properties anymore. You can be a couple, both of you could be in high earning jobs. You just together, you can't even buy properties anymore because they've gone so high. So the property bubble in the West is still growing. So that is still an issue in the West, while China is trying to do everything they can to manage it before it gets too big. So that's the difference, guys. Number 10, infrastructure projects. So this year, China is investing over 6.8 trillion yuan, about $1 trillion of government funds available for construction projects. And this is 3 times more than it was this time last year. And this article is from Bloomberg, and you can see so far this year, China has approved investment projects worth 3 times what was approved this time last year. So 3 times as much. And according to Bloomberg, it's costing around 1 trillion. However, I'm looking at some Chinese websites, and one particular one called Sitao.com, which is a very good Chinese website. I love Sitao.com because I've got a degree in civil engineering, so I love infrastructure projects. I love, hearing construction projects all over the world. So you can see this is one of my favorite websites. So they are aware, obviously, of the Bloomberg report, and you can see here. Recently, American media reported articles about Chinese infrastructure construction. There are large-scale projects in China totaling $1 trillion. However, relevant data show that Beijing is providing about $1 trillion of government funds for relevant construction projects. By some estimates, China's total construction spending is even higher, 3 times that, once bank loans and corporate funding are added. So you can see it's not 1 trillion they are spending this year on infrastructure, it's about 3 trillion. So that is a huge amount compared to last year. And China is going ahead with that. And they're not going to go ahead with that amount of money if they didn't have any money. And when all of these infrastructure projects happen, it creates jobs, it creates wealth, and it's for the good of people. For example, all of these high-speed rail links linking all of these Chinese cities by high-speed rail cuts journey time, and this means that people can travel between cities faster. They can work in one city, live in another city. They will move money around between cities. They'll move goods. There's so much benefits having high-speed rail, having high infrastructure between cities. It really helps with growth of a country. So I'm going to talk about all of the infrastructure projects which have been highlighted as what's going to take China out of this slump and into the next level. So you can see here, number 1 is renewables. Deserts in North China are set to host a build-up of renewable energy. In recent months, construction began on wind and solar bases, which by 2030 will contain as much renewable capacity as currently in all of Europe. The first phase, about 100 gigawatts of turbines of solar panels, is due to be completed by next year, which will add another 450 gigawatts phase starting this year. Second phase will cost more than 3 trillion yuan. According to state media, ultra-high voltage transmission lines will transport the energy into densely populated eastern seaboard. China's state-owned grid company plans to build 13 of them this year. Combining investment in total renewable energy and power transmission, China's green investment could reach 2.6 trillion yuan this year alone, according to Australia and New Zealand banking group. Canals, dams and reservoirs. Construction of canals, dams and reservoirs have been stepped up, with more than 800 billion yuan set to be invested in these projects this year. Most ambitious is a 200 meter long tunnel moving water from the country's Yangtze River into a reservoir that will feed northern China. This scheme is known as the South-North Water Transfer Project. It will be the world's longest water tunnel, beating the current record holder in Finland, and parts will be as deep as 1 kilometer underground. So what I know is this South to North Water Transfer Project on the eastern side and the central side is almost finished. They have a few bits and pieces to complete, and they have another western side which is still in the planning stage at the moment. And what I've heard today as well, they're also building another canal which will go from the Yangtze into southern China, which will reach the South Asian countries as well, ASEAN countries, and they're spending billions and billions, hundreds of billions onto that as well. China is also building a lot of reservoirs. This year, China has learnt that they have a major issue with drought, with water levels reaching very low levels this year. So what China is going to be doing is building up a lot of reservoirs over the next 5 to 10 years. They want to try and keep as much water as possible. They're also building a lot of green cities, and these green cities will be able to keep water, rainfall, and they'll be able to recycle water much better and more effectively. So you have China building the urban infrastructure, including urban roads, gas and water pipe networks and parks, is the most popular choice of spending by the local governments, which will account for the bulk of China's infrastructure spending. The latest plan includes linking together existing cities into a single area. For example, a zone approved around the city of Xi'an in March has a current population of 18 million people. After decades of concrete sprawl, the focus is shifting towards greener cities. Central China's Songya Lake Ecological New City, which began construction this year at an estimated cost of 200 billion yuan, has specified it will leave 70% of the area for green spaces and water. That's the same ratio of buildings to natural space as in under construction of the city of Xiong'an near Beijing, which planners around the city are taking as a model after it was championed by President Xi Jinping. High-speed rail. I don't have to remind you about the amount of high-speed rail China has. China has already 40,000 kilometers of high-speed rail, more than twice as much as the rest of the planet combined, and dozens of big-ticket projects are still ongoing. The most ambitious is a 1,621 kilometer line from Sichuan to the Tibetan capital Lhasa, climbing more than 3,000 meters to earthquake-prone terrain and glaciers, is expected to be completed by 2030, and the total cost of the entire project is 320 billion yuan. China said this year is planned to have 70,000 kilometers of high-speed rail by 2035, and that implies a 40% decline in the amount of track built each year compared to the pace set over the next 5 years. In other words, while China will continue to outspend the rest of the world on rail, its spending could gradually decline. The same is true for highways and subways. China plans to construct or restore 58,000 kilometers of expressways by 2035, and also Chinese cities are adding underground subway lines at a rapid pace, but national spending peaked in 2020 with 629 billion yuan according to the China Metro Association. And you can see the map here with the amount of lines China has with high speed. And I have to say, this list does not finish the whole amount of infrastructure projects that China is doing. There's a lot of stuff from this list that's not on the Bloomberg list. For example, they're building a lot of 5G masts. They are building EV infrastructure all around China as well. So there's a lot of work that's ongoing which is not in the list. And you can see here as well, in July 2022 alone, a total of 3,876 major projects have been started in China with a total investment of 2.393 billion yuan. Amongst them, infrastructure projects are still one key areas of intensive construction in various places. So you can see, just the month of July alone, they are spending about 500 billion US dollars in terms of those yuan to dollar figures, and you know it's going to be ongoing. So there's huge amounts of infrastructure projects they're doing in China, and with all of these 10 reasons I've given you, this is why the Chinese economy is not going to collapse. And if you believe that Chinese economy is going to collapse in 20 days or 30 days, then you are, I'm sorry to say, an idiot. If you do not believe all that stuff and you're here to subscribe to my channel, you love listening to the truth, you love listening to what's really happening around the world, then you are one of the few intelligent ones, and I have to take my hat off to you guys because you are very much a minority. You have 1.7 million people, subscribing to all of these idiots out there on the internet, on the YouTube, listening to all of this crap, being brainwashed. But you guys are following the truth. You guys are following the right channels, and I completely commend you guys. So if you haven't subscribed already, make sure you subscribe. Make sure you like, comment, share, whatever you can do to support the channel. Make sure you join my Patreon. Make sure you join my locals even. And I'll see you in the next video, guys. Thanks for the support, and I'll see you soon.